The High Court in East London has gone back on its ruling nullifying the ANC's Dr. W.B. Rubusana Regional Conference. The court order invalidated the meetings of about 40 branches, deeming them unconstitutional and unlawful. But that order has been rescinded, and observers say this decision is likely to have serious consequences for the elected leadership. To discuss this further is Eastern Cape ANC spokesperson Loyiso Magqashela. Loyiso, good morning and thank you very much for your time. I'm sure yesterday you saw that interview. We spoke to Ondela Kolomani, who's leading the 5 applicants. He gave us his version of how the court came to grant an order in their favour unopposed. He says your legal counsel filed papers well in advance, but was a no-show on the day the matter was to be heard. What exactly happened?
Good morning, Vondo. Good morning to you and the viewers. I listened to it. Of course, it was shared to me via WhatsApp. It was after it has been done. Look, Mfundo, it would be between the court and our legal representatives in terms of them informing each other about the sittings and whether the case will be proceeding in which court. And we would then depend on what our legal representatives would do and say. And that is where we are as we speak. But listening from what they had to report to us when we got to hear about the court order, it was reported that the court in East London is only dealing with cases that are unopposed. And that case, as far as they know, and as far as we know, is a case that was having papers submitted opposing that which was claimed by the applicants. Therefore, it then ruled against the court order because it was heard in an irrelevant court.
All right. So from what I'm getting is that it was on the unopposed roll. It was erroneously placed on the unopposed roll, even though you had filed papers.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So there was no intention by your legal practitioner to abscond or anything of that nature. It was in the wrong court.
Not at all. They had no intentions of such nature. Yes, it was in a wrong court.
Okay. So then what happened with the Zoom session? We understand that beyond that point, you then wrote to the judge president. There was then a Zoom session where both representatives were there. And what was discussed at that particular meeting?
Look, we wouldn't be exposed to such facts as we were not part of the meeting. But of course, there were errors in the arrival to the, order issuing on the day, which were admitted by the judge who was presiding over on the day, Judge Stretch, if I'm not mistaken, which then on acknowledging the wrongful or actions that were taken on the day, it was then by both parties agreed that this has to be rescheduled to be heard in a relevant platform, which I think it has been scheduled for the 28th of this month.
So that
is just what we had.
So judging from what you're saying, there actually should have been no hullabaloo because there was then a conversation around when did you apply for the rescission of that order, when would the rescission have been heard, but it means all parties understood there was an error from the judge, so even the rescission itself was not an ordinary rescission where you would have to apply.
Look, I wouldn't get to such matters, but both parties acknowledged that there was an error in issuing such an order. Therefore, it had to be rescinded. And what then becomes the legal, connotations, the legal agreements and understanding would be between the judge and the legal representatives of both parties, the ANC and the applicants. Then ours is just to then say, what then is the process forward from there? Because this has been coming a long way, if you will recall. It started sometime in April. It started sometime in August 2021 with the lawyers writing to the ANC. We responded. We did everything else in putting into order. All that was an outcry. All that was a consensus, as was raised by the lawyers The judge came in, we were directed to do all the corrections, all those things were done. Now, but there's still some issues that are coming up, which then the lawyers are handling those. We have left it there for them to discuss and engage in a platform where we don't want to get into any nitty-gritties of such, because we are not in that space, so that we do not jeopardize any of the prospects of the case.
No, very understandable. Then to BGMs, how are they coming along? Any incidences that have been reported, or everything is going smoothly?
There are no incidents at all. I can confidently report that one. And we're just struggling now with having to reschedule because there are technical glitches. Some QR codes wouldn't be working. Some would arrive late when, members of the organization already have decided to leave because of time constraints and all of that. Maybe it's getting too late. But in terms of actions that are not acceptable, as you witnessed earlier, people were brandishing firearms and all of those things, securities had to be hired. We don't have such incidents as we speak. It is, of course, the nature of the national conference. It doesn't have contestations as you would witness in regional and provincial conferences. That is otherwise everything is still in order, except such glitches. But I can tell you now that we are at least lagging behind big time in terms of reaching the intended numbers, which for us, if I may just be explicit a bit, we are supposed to be convening 641 branches. As of now, we are still around 150 and above. And yet, in due course, on the 25th is the cutoff date, which then requires leadership to really apply its mind into that and advise accordingly in terms of shifting the cutoff date a bit. But we have, of course, fielded quite a number of branches over the weekend, which we are still expecting a verification report, which may then give a positive outcome. And then, of course, Wednesday, also quite a number of branches are going and over the weekend. But we're hopeful that we will at least pull through